Hello. As someone who's worked in development all over the world for many years, the biggest danger of climate change as I see it is that it could reverse decades of positive development achievements. The Millennium Development Goals from 2000 to 2015 saw unprecedented progress, for example, in reducing poverty, hunger, child stunting and malnutrition, and in other areas like health and education. But progress has been uneven across regions and countries, leaving significant gaps. Millions of people are still being left behind, especially the poorest and disadvantaged. Climate change exacerbates these inequalities. The poorest and most vulnerable are the hardest hit. To have any hope of achieving the new Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, we must both adapt quickly to climate change and reduce emissions, both with urgency. So the theme of this year's LEAF conference couldn't be more timely. It epitomises the world's greatest climate challenge, how to take action now. The World Bank, where I work, is an international development organisation owned by 187 countries. Its role is to reduce poverty and inequality. Like any bank, it lends money, in our case, to governments of poor countries, to improve their economies and standard of living of their people. This year, the bank made $77 billion in loans, including $21 billion for climate change. And over the next 5 years, it will invest $200 billion in climate adaptation and mitigation projects. The bank is also one of the world's largest research centres for development practice, helping governments, investors, and development practitioners to improve development outcomes. For example, we pioneered the Climate Smart Agriculture Country Profiles approach that helps countries address climate change in their agriculture and food systems. So far, the bank has helped 30 countries design programmes to meet or exceed their commitments under the Paris Agreement. And by screening all World Bank operations for climate risk and using carbon pricing to guide investments, the bank is taking the lead in ensuring development aims and climate change efforts create win-wins rather than exacerbating trade-offs. So let's consider the world food system, all the way from production and supply by farmers to demand and consumption by consumers. It really does an amazing job. For the past 50 years, food production has outpaced population growth, providing jobs and livelihoods for well over 1 billion people and adding $8 trillion a year to global GDP. If the food system were a country, it would have the third largest GDP in the world after USA and China. But this performance comes at high cost to people and the planet. Most studies of climate change impacts on agriculture look forward by projecting yields of major crops in different places as the planet warms and weather patterns change and extreme events like droughts and floods become more frequent. In lower latitudes, most yields are expected to fall by over 20%. But one recent study found that yields of the top 10 crops are actually already affected by climate change. For example, rice production down by 0.3% a year and wheat by 0.9% a year. Globally, climate change already depresses consumable food calorie supply by 1% a year, and this is only the beginning. So, although there are negative impacts on agriculture, which must be addressed through better adaptation, we can't ignore the negative effects that agriculture and the food system are contributing to climate change. Our food system is both a victim and a culprit of climate change. But with the right incentives, approaches, and innovations, we know it can be a big part of the solution. The good news is that farmers, researchers, policymakers, and consumers are all becoming aware and starting to take action, institutionally or personally, or both. There's now more recognition than ever that humanity is eating beyond its means and that providing a growing population with a healthy diet while keeping within safe planetary limits will require radical transformation of the whole food system. So what can UK farmers and researchers do to address the climate crisis, and what's their leadership role? LEAF is an excellent example of farmers and researchers working together with others to find and promote sustainable climate-smart solutions. This approach merits being massively scaled up nationally and internationally to become a real movement for change. UK could play a major role. Just think of how Oxfam developed and the impact it now has. The UK government is already stepping up with its proposed repurposing of farm subsidies into payments for environmental services. If successful, this could be a real beacon for the world, especially since UK will be at the centre of the climate change debate when you host COP26 in Glasgow next year. Don't forget, governments spend about $600 billion a year on direct farm subsidies around the world. That's more than the carbon value of all agriculture and food system emissions at a carbon price of $40 a tonne. If evidence from UK convinces other countries to follow suit on subsidies, the global impact could be enormous. I applaud the NFU's goal to reach net zero emissions across the whole of agriculture in England and Wales by 2040. This sends a really strong signal to COP26 that UK farmers mean business. Hopefully, you won't stop at net zero, but also look to ways in the future of becoming carbon negative. Agriculture is the only sector able to capture carbon from the atmosphere and store it naturally in vast amounts. We must exploit that advantage fully, especially when the world decides on a realistic price for carbon, which hopefully will be soon. Only a fundamental transformation of the way we produce, process, market and consume food can be counted as success. This needs to be as great and as radical as previous revolutions in agriculture, but this time much faster. By 2030, this transformation needs to be well underway and it needs to be unstoppable. Concrete plans, policies, commitments, incentives, legislation and financing must be implemented that will ensure the global food and agriculture system delivers three main things. Firstly, to reduce emissions that contribute at least 30% of the mitigation needed by the Paris Agreement. Secondly, widespread adoption of the planetary human health diet, vastly reducing the environmental, human and economic costs of both under and over nutrition. And thirdly, more inclusive development by increasing productivity and financial viability, especially of small farms worldwide, through sustainable intensification. And we know how much this would cost. It can be achieved at a cost of around $320 billion a year over 10 years and would generate $5.5 trillion in social benefits, giving a 15-fold return on investment. Repurposing just 50% of subsidies worldwide could pay for all this. LEAF and similar non-government grassroots and consumer organisations can play a key role in continuing to demonstrate what can be achieved in practice and by influencing investors and governments to find the financial and the political will to support and facilitate a great agriculture and food system transformation soon. If I had one climate change wish, it would be this: that COP26 is a resounding success and world governments would recognise that food and agriculture is indispensable for addressing the climate emergency. Other sectors such as energy and transport are making much greater and faster progress. Not surprisingly, given they've attracted the lion's share of public and private investment, while investments in food and agricultural innovation have lagged behind, and this needs to change. So, my climate change wish is that COP26 succeeds by resulting in three things. Firstly, an upward revision of the Paris Declaration targets and commitments by all sectors. Secondly, greater political will to prioritise the agriculture and food system in climate change initiatives. And thirdly, more investment in agriculture and food systems, especially for research and innovation. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon at the LEAF Annual Conference, and stay safe until then.